Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Welcome. Excited to host another educational session as part of the Uplift Mentorship Program. Hope everyone had a wonderful 4th of July and are getting back into the moves and grooves of the work week. Today's fireside chat is Service as a Strategy, how customer experience becomes your competitive edge. Obviously, this topic is especially timely as AI continues to make many capabilities faster, cheaper, more accessible. Increasingly, what differentiates you isn't exactly what you build, but also how you serve your customers and the relationships you create. With that said, I'm thrilled to welcome our special guest, Christina Perla. She's a co-founder and CEO of Make Lab. Based in Brooklyn and San Francisco, Make Lab is an on-demand 3D printing and additive manufacturing company. Their clients include Peloton, Estee Lauder, Rock Nation, just to name a few. Under Christina's leadership, Make Lab has become known not only for its technical expertise, but transforming what's often a highly transactional industry into one centered around trust, relationships, and customer strategy. With that said, love to introduce Christina. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
I'd love to start with you just sharing more about your origin story from acquiring the small print shop in 2017 to what the company is today. Could you share a little bit more about your background and the kind of journey that led you here?
Yeah, so my background's in industrial design. I went to Pratt for ID. That's where I met my now husband and co-founder, Manny, also an industrial designer. And after school, I had an internship that turned into a job, and then I went to another job. One was Converse, one was a much smaller, like wearable tech design firm, and both I just had this itch that I wanted to kind of run my own show. That's where it started in my 22-year-old brain. And so I quit. I started freelancing and taking on random design projects. And then uh, with that, Manny and I kind of joined forces and we started doing it together. We created a company out of it. We were 3D printing a lot and then ended up acquiring that vendor that also became our friends. And so that's what Make Lab. That's how Make Lab started.
Great. No, thank you for sharing that. I think one of my favorite parts about that story is that Make Lab wasn't exactly like the grand and master plan, that it kind of evolved and found you. Looking back, how much do you think of that was like strategy and intent versus kind of just knowing to seize opportunities when they fall in front of you?
It was much more an opportunity than a whole big plan. And they always say like start a business when you're naive because you don't know what you're getting yourself into. And I would say Manny and I are the perfect examples of that. We had no idea what we were getting ourselves into, but we had very, very strong intuitive gut feeling that this was the right thing to do and it was going to change our lives. And so basically the owner of the vendor, it was called 3D Uniprint. They were very, very small husband and wife team, like 10 printers or something, making under 100 grand. But they were like, they texted me on a Sunday night and asked if we wanted to acquire the company because they were moving back to the Shenzhen area. And then the feeling that I got from that text message told me a lot of what I needed to know. And it's with gut, I'm a very intuitive and sensing and feeling type of person. And so I always uh, try to check in with like what is my physical reaction to things, what's my emotional reaction to things, and then validate it. So I always do a trust but verify, and that's what happened.
Great. Obviously, I think you shared your early 20s. That can be quite nerve-wracking. I think imposter syndrome is real for everyone. Where do you find like the confidence to continue? Like, do you use support system, peer network? Like, do you have any practices that help keep you structured?
I don't know actually because I it didn't always feel like I had confidence, but I think from the outside looking in, people are always asking me like, "How did you know? How did you do this? Like you were so young, blah blah blah." I'm an only child, and so maybe that's part of it. Like I did a lot of sports as well. I went to summer camp. Like I was always one of few, and I was always like the only like woman of color in the room, and so I'm kind of used to being uncomfortable. I guess I think my childhood and my adolescence has really trained me just to get used to being uncomfortable and then figuring it out along the way. So I mean, looking back, that's the therapy answer. But in terms of the now answer, I don't know. When I set my eyes on like a goal and I'm on a mission, like I nothing can stop me. That's just always been my personality.
That's great. I think reminding everyone that being uncomfortable is not a bad thing.
No.
Is helpful just to say out loud, because I think instantly, like, bodies, mind, anything, stability, you're like, this isn't a fit. That's not always true. So I think that's
Yeah, like I was not good at soccer, did travel soccer for a number of years. My mom put me in diving like class for 4 weeks, knew nobody. What else? Cheerleading was another one, dance was another one, art class. I had a single mom, so she put me in a lot of activities to make sure I wasn't like bored at home. Did ice skating too. So all these things I was extremely uncomfortable in all the time
looks
as a
like it
kid.
all worked out.
Yeah.
You described 3D printing is a world that can be technical, transactional, and intimidating. We touched on what it means to be uncomfortable and push yourself. But you said the people behind the scenes have shaped your whole experience. When did you realize that customer experience was your edge and, frankly, is the edge?
I always, I think even before starting a business, that maybe it's just a fact of being an industrial designer. Like you're always taught to lean into the user experience and like what does your user need. And so I think the fact that Manny and I are both industrial designers and we took that philosophy and applied it to business, it wasn't an aha moment. Like it was just part of me and Manny's like ethos. And so I think we always wanted to make sure that we had attention to detail, that we were spotting things before clients, and we wanted to make it we knew like the feeling that we wanted clients to have while working with us. And I had a sense of the feeling that clients were having working with our competitors. And um, little bits of qualitative feedback, right? Like little comments here or there, like general feedback, general side conversations when people come pick up. That was enough to shape and point us, validate that we were headed in the right direction with the customer experience approach.
When you say like what you wanted out of them to have out of a customer experience versus what they were having, could you get a little more granular, specific of what you were seeing was going wrong, and what you identified is what you were going to fix?
The way I see it when you zoom out is a manufacturer, someone that's like making. So when you're creating a product, for example, or you're making anything or you're designing anything, a lot of the hard part is really in the digital process. Like when you're coming up with the concept, you're coming up with the specs, and you're designing the actual thing. The making of it should feel easy. It's a shock to most that it's a lot more complex than it is. But I always thought it could be a little less complex and a little less difficult feeling than others, than our competitors were, providing. And so the feeling I wanted to that the feeling that we wanted like our clients to have when working with us was I wanted them to learn something new. Maybe this isn't their specialty, but at least learn, so by your 10th order you're a bit of a pro at this point. I knew our client base was full of designers and engineers and a bunch of nerds that like to learn new things. And so it's a gratifying experience. And then I also wanted to make sure that we made it easy for them to learn and it felt easy. So I wanted like the worst is when you work with somebody and you think you understand the process, then they kind of pull a fast one on you and they're like, oh, but I didn't, oh, but this, oh, but there was this trade-off, there was this exception, there was this blah blah blah, and you didn't know about it in the beginning. I don't like with the way we approach it, like the trade-offs based on your choices. Ultimately it's your choice. If you want something cheaper, you might have to sacrifice speed or quality. If you want something if you want something fast, you might have to sacrifice the cost a little bit because we have to prioritize you. So we always like our client experience always makes sure to prioritize that because nothing's ever perfect. You can never achieve all three. You can never achieve the best price, the best quality, and the best lead time. That's like a rule of thumb. You can only achieve two at a time unless someone's I don't know. I don't know any company that's actually can do all three like really well. Um, so we make that known from the start, and we communicate that through other points of the experience, not just a human talking to you, but in the software that we're developing, there's always reminders of these trade-offs, kind of like dropped in, and designed in.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense, especially from a community background too. For me,
Yeah.
even setting and hosting events, of like guiding people how to walk into a room, what the expectations are. I think that's true for home shopping, for events.
Everything.
No,
Like we're a bit spoiled of a generation, and so the expectations can really be all over the place. And so it's really important to understand what the expectations are coming into a conversation, coming into working with somebody, and then working from that point. And I think that takes emotional effort that not a lot of companies are willing to do.
um, when you said that you were addressing things, figuring out what your customers needed, you were drawing on a lot of qualitative data, just feedback that you were getting from people, knowing that people are demanding. And while you do want to listen to your customer, you don't want to listen to them too much. How do you find the balance in that and kind of make sense of what's feedback that you could take and digest and feedback to put to the side?
A lot of times, like, I think the best realizations for us was realizing this is a partnership. I'm not just at your service. Like Make Lab is not just at your service. We are doing something on your behalf, but we still can't achieve the impossible. And so like kind of reminding, like approaching client experience and client relationships as a relationship, as like, reminding them that you're human, reminding them that there are physical limitations, that there are physics that limit us from doing the impossible, things like that. And communicating clearly, transparently, and within the right timing is everything as well. Like when you say things really matters, and that's sort of that intuitive sense. Like that's client relationship management, like 101. But really, just reading the room is a really big skill, right? And so if you can do that really well, then with the intention that you want them to understand your process, and like you want them to learn a little bit about the details without micromanaging you, there's a fine line there. It you just take on the cues and you just read the room at every bit of the conversation or every step of the interaction. I don't know if that answered your question. I might have gone off topic.
No, it answered my question. I think the nuances are what people want to skip over, especially when you want to move faster, better, smarter, harder. They think that the quick way is the better. And while there's obviously a balance, I think reminding the human aspect, especially now, is ever important.
And I think like how you deliver the message matters. And so people, like when you're delivering bad news, people tend to tense up. But I think it's really important to uh, try to not to and try to deliver it in the friendliest way. Like imagine how like doctors deliver really terrible news, right? Like they don't get yelled at. They don't get like they don't things don't flip on them and they don't start well, sometimes people do. But like, you know, bedside manner is a really big aspect of being in medical, right? And so that's just something you have to learn. But I don't know why that nuance, why that notion really disappears in any other client experience service based role. Like same with hospitality, right? There's a level of like you really need to know how to deliver that message, and it's not a book, it's not black and white, it's all gray. You just have to really read the room, read the person, and understand what comes next and be 5 steps ahead. I always tell everybody, be 5 steps ahead of everything we do.
Um, I obviously you had somewhat of a customer base when you started acquiring
Hmm.
from a small print shop, and the customer experience plays a huge part in referrals, word of mouth. How did you guys make that jump from kind of a small business serving local people to household names like Peloton, Rock Nation?
We leaned into community a bunch. I quickly became involved with women in 3D printing. I was like hosting events. I put my face everywhere I could. I made sure people knew my name. I kept talking about us alongside like not I wouldn't say a strong content strategy, but a content strategy, just so we kept appearing. Um, and then half of it is really just doing a good job. When someone like Peloton or a robotics company hears about your company, you're gonna immediately be met with skepticism. But you want someone else to be like, no, 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 they're actually really great. I just had, and then tell a story about you. And so a lot of times, like we think about every order, we really focus on doing it successfully and managing the expectations correctly, so that people have good stories to tell, because word of mouth is half the battle in an industry like manufacturing, where advertising might bring awareness, but it doesn't mean conversion, rightfully so, right? Because making things is really complex.
Now, I want to go back to your industrial design thinking background and how that framed how you were proceeding with customer experience. Could we just dive a little bit deeper into that?
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, so talk me through some like if you were to call it a framework of the logic. I really liked the analogy of like a user versus a customer and thinking
Yeah.
through friction and what's confusing and kind of the design of that.
Yeah. Don't really have a framework, more just of a mindset. Like I'm not as much of a planner as I am a feeler. Like the INTJ stuff, I forget what I am, but I'm definitely like high on the feeling. And so um I always I like and I'm very empathetic, and so I really like to think about like how do I want someone to feel after working with us? How do I want someone to feel after a positive experience, after a not so great experience, maybe all of the above. And so I think about that and I think about what would make them come back in either situation, right? And so if I think about it, I just don't want to be one of their headaches. Like that's what it boils down to. Like you don't want to be the thing that they bring home and complain to their spouse about. Like that's a terrible position to be in. If your company's doing that, like you're headed straight from the ground because that feeling will stay with that person for a very, very long time. So you will instead want to like you want to be the one where maybe they don't even come back to you until they need something again because they're just not thinking about you because you did your job and that's it. Like it's over. I always say no news is best news for a lot of cases because we're not the center of attention. We're not the main stage. We are supporting them. So if we help deliver a great prototype or an appearance model for a big meeting with a potential buyer of some sort, um, why would they come back to us? We were just like 10% of the 10% of the thing, even though they were like it was a lot of effort. And so I think about that a lot. And I just think and I think it's not really a framework. It's all intuitive at this point from the design background. But you always the same thing with software, right? You always want to make sure you're thinking like where could someone click that they're not supposed to? What are the edge cases? How do I like if they are on an edge case, how do they rally them back to the intended user flow? Blah blah blah. Um, what questions might they have at each click, at each step, and uh, and demographics play a big part of it as well. Different generations are different, obviously, but there are, and this applies across the board, right? A Gen Xer is way different than a millennial, way different than a Gen Zer, and they all have different thresholds of patience. And so it's really important to understand that as well.
No, even though you're not calling it a framework, I think those key takeaways and being able to concisely synthesize this is our approach is incredibly helpful for founders and
Yeah.
people who are trying to build. Talking about how the best news is no news, but there's always the edge case of no matter what you do, having an unhappy customer or a mistake or a project that just went wrong. How do you handle fixing it, resolving it, and turning that and converting that into loyalty or knowing that it's okay to have a bad day?
First, first you have to assess if it's worth it. Honestly, you have to assess how much of a qualified lead they are and how much like how much what is their social capital, are they going to go write reviews like do TikToks about you? You want to assess the damage and you want to assess the potential of them coming back, so you want to assess both sides. If you deem that it's worth saving, that it's something, there's a few levels to this because you don't want to just let it go either. Sometimes it is a lost cause, but that's probably only between 1 to 5%. Most of the times you want to do something so that at least they take the lesson with them for the next vendor and maybe they'll come back in 3 years. Like that's how we think about it. So if it's one core thing is integrity shows up with material things in this industry. I think whenever you're a service business, right? Like something that is low cost, but maybe a little bit more effort, that's all that's needed a lot of the times, paired with a nice delivery of the message to turn someone around. And you want to get them in the place where they're like, shit happens. I get it. But MakeLab handled it really well, and I really felt taken care of. Like that's the feeling you want. And like, what does that mean in your industry? It could mean different things. So, for example, there was a project that we just had. This is very, very recent, like today. It was a shared fault thing where someone asked us to resize something and we resized the wrong dimension. So it ended up being 2x taller than what it was supposed to be. And so we're reprinting it. And he settled for a free reprint. That was fine. The client relationship was kind of like okay at that point. It wasn't the best. He's like, yeah, that's the least you could do. But then I noticed he came in and I spoke with him and he mentioned that he took Ubers to get down here to pick up. So one thing I added on top was like, you don't need to come here. We'll just courier to you. Do you want us to courier it straight to your painter? That's fine. We'll do batch shipping too. So you'll get a shipment Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. For us, couriers are $10. And so it's a really easy thing for us to do that saves him about $200 in Ubers and a lot of time because of Brooklyn traffic. So once you understand like what you're playing with and like the costs of the different efforts and actions by both parties, it's really easy to negotiate and really spin it into something. And something as little as a $30 spend on our part and batch shipping, which we already do for customers. He was like so grateful. He was so thankful. You know, he was happy. He was smiling. He was like, I really want to keep working with you guys. And so that's sometimes you just need to give a little, right? But very in a calculated way.
No, I love that. And on the consumer side, I am absolutely someone where even if I'm greeted just a little bit differently
Yeah.
in a space where they weren't really, that it absolutely changes like how I feel about them. So I love that you guys have infused that
Yeah.
in
And
business.
like also like we work with a lot of creative people, designers and engineers, and they're usually almost always stressed. And
Mhm.
so again, going back to like how do we want them to feel? You want them to feel like you made their life or their day just a little bit better. Like you don't want to be part of the problem. You want to be the anti, right? When everyone's zigging, you zag. So like if everyone else is giving them shit, don't be the one to add to it.
You make it sound so simple, but it really is an art that I would love to
It's an
commend.
art. It's such an art, and it takes a lot of patience, and it takes a lot of self-care, and it takes a lot of, like, proper headspace, and I think a part of it too is, like, do you have the emotional capacity to deal with this? Because as a founder, you're probably dealing with so many other things, like, I still am, even though we're, like, 9 years old, and, like, I think a big part of it is if you're feeling angry and not, like, good about something, it's best to let it cool down. Cool down, come back to it so you can be you don't want your reaction to dictate um, a negative business experience, right? It's okay to have a reaction, just elsewhere and maybe not to the customer. If you got to get it out, scream it out, cry it out, whatever, you're human. Like it happens, right? So just do that. But like if you're feeling that, like notice how you're feeling physically. And if like things are feeling tight, tense, sweaty, or whatever, and you're just angry, um, take 5 and then come back to it. Or take a day even. It's okay.
Like that. One thing we didn't cover that I think it is a through line for many of the founders in the program this summer is kind of making that jump from just friends and family, your direct customers, what happens word of mouth, and then scaling. In your case, you've grown to multiple cities now. How did you scale it, and how did you keep this service quality so high that you're talking about that clearly is incredibly important to you, but might not be to an employee or another location?
So we did scale. We did open up an SF location. We did, but we actually closed it a year ago. And so what happened was an employee was moving out there. And so we saw an opportunity to test something out. And so we knew that we were going to give this a period of time to test. And then we were going to decide at a certain point whether we were going to continue or if we were going to scale back, take those lessons, and then turn into something different. And so we learned a few things from that. One was scaling to different cities makes sense, but only as a fulfillment play, not as a sales play. So unless we have a factory in another area, it's not really worth it. That's something we learned. So when our employee left, that's around the time we wound down operations in SF, and we thought the time zone was difficult. The culture differences we weren't quite prepared for. Like people, the hiring pool in SF is very different than the hiring pool over here in New York. They say New York is really intense, and I get it now. I've been New Jersey, New York my whole life, so I'm in a bit of a bubble, but it's very different. Like people here are very, very different. urgency is very big, and it's not so much the case. Not that they don't have urgency, but to the level of New York urgency, it's not the same across the country and in other countries. And so that was a big learning. Um, the person that moved out there had been in New York for like 6 years, and so she definitely brought that. But we did once she left, we were like, do we hire out there and then train from afar? Like the trips to SF, like it didn't feel meaningful enough to continue at that point. And we decided, let's bring everything back here and let's grow this. Let's grow our operations. We ended up moving to a place 5 times bigger, all that stuff. And then we were like, let's centralize here, build software, do all this stuff so it's easier next time around.
I think that's great advice. Not a direct comparison, but even with like how fast you can ship things now, something that I've noticed is that someone will over productize their experience. They'll add 37 features. And while there is a time to add a feature, sometimes perfecting what you have in front of you is often a really strong route. I know we're getting close to wrapping time. Does anyone have any questions for Christina? Feel free to ask any in the chat. In the meantime, while we're seeing if we get any questions, I'd love to hear if you have like one piece of advice for a founder who's, let's say, 6 months into their company about designing a company that customers love.
Don't be afraid to get your hands dirty and put yourself on the front line. Like put yourself at the point where you can collect the most data, and don't be afraid to go back there sometimes to understand what's needed. There was a time when I was further away from the operations and I didn't know what was next because I couldn't see. I didn't have enough information. I didn't have enough context about what we were doing. I barely knew what was print. I mean, still to this day, I don't really know what's printing. That's fine, but I can understand, and I have at least a viewpoint where I can see what people are ordering. I can see patterns. I can see patterns of personas, patterns of parts, patterns of, calendar year stuff. And so it's enough to make informed decisions. And I think if I hadn't been on the ground in the beginning meaning like a couple years, putting myself out there, being uncomfortable, like doing what felt anti-CEO shit, because there's like so much ego that goes with that title, but like honestly it's chief everything officer, and especially in the beginning you really got to like just buckle down and put yourself right there.
Oh, I love that. I think honestly, glass half full and deciding to just go for it is an incredible mentality. Before we hop off, we did get one question, a couple questions actually. So, how do you handle clients who question your pricing or question your ability based on size?
First, try to understand why they're questioning it. Are they just uneducated? Are they trying to lowball me? They don't respect me? Like, which one is it, right? Because whichever one it is, it determines your potential outcomes. So I always try to lean on manufacturing is like volume, material used, and time equals price. And so a lot of times we take the approach of just boiling it back down, right? And like explaining the trade-offs. Like, yes, there are rush fees because if you want all of these parts in such a short amount of time, I have to put you ahead of other clients. And reasonably so, that results in a rush fee, of course. Based on size, I feel like that's an assumption unless they're outwardly saying it. If they're outwardly saying it, then I say goodbye. like like what the hell is that? Like that's not a relationship I want to get into. You don't respect me from the get-go. Okay, see you in 5 years when we get bigger, like I don't know if that's everybody's response, but that's mine. And yeah. I mean, sometimes you can cut a deal too. Like I always say, see how the conversation goes. If the relationship's really worth it, do some digging on the person. If the relationship's really worth it for referral reasons, social capital reasons, or potential recurring revenue reasons, then yeah, maybe cut them a deal. Maybe, but you have to frame it, right? You can't let them expect that there's a deal every single time they talk to you. But maybe it's a first timers deal. Maybe it's a try us out deal. That can be spun into a growing relationship. So you just really need to know how to spin it.
I think that's helpful. I think framing the way you word something, the way you deliver something can change the outcome 10, 100 times over.
Totally.
But no, I think it's also a really healthy reminder that while like the customer is paying you, that they're not always right, and that you do have a level of control, and that not everything is make or break. I think drawing it back to, sorry, my dogs are really barking in the background. I don't know if you can hear. Drawing it back to like taking those breathers, making those decisions that are right for you. I think it is an incredibly helpful reminder for everybody.
The other thing to mention too, oh shit, I just lost it. Oh crap. Wait, what was the question? Price your size. Oh fuck. I just lost it. Oh, no, I just lost. I was gonna say spin into something else, but I forgot what it was. It'll come back to me, maybe.
Well, I want to also be mindful of your time and everybody's time. And everyone has loved this conversation. Echoing Angela, like, thank you so much for sharing your personal experience with us. I think being unfiltered, being raw, being honest about how you feel and how you build it is incredibly important. And kind of just by osmosis, like it allows people to learn traits and behaviors that they wouldn't otherwise. So thank you so much.
Yeah, of course, of course. Yeah. There's like, I feel like as an early stage founder, there's so much going on in your head about what you're supposed to do, and you're not really in tune with yourself. But the only way to not burn out is to really be in tune with how you're feeling. And I know it's like soft and gooey, but like, I don't know, we're human, right? So,
Amazing. Thank you so much. Have a good rest of your day.
you
Appreciate your
too.
time. See you,
Thanks so
everyone.
much.